Share via email. Report story. Chapter 5. Something had changed. It stirred Izuku out of sleep in fits and starts as he reluctantly clambered his way back to consciousness. Something was off, and his body had evidently decided he wasn't going to be able to get back to bed until he figured out what was happening. Pity. He felt like he'd been in the middle of a really good dream, even if he couldn't remember what it was. The first thing his bleary eyes seized on was the couch blanket that he'd been using half thrown off like someone had rolled out from under it. That meant he was on the mattress. Then where was Ochako? He tried to sit up and look around, but his arm caught, trapped under something that he couldn't quite make out in the dim light. Whatever it was small, and warm, and smelled faintly of his own shampoo. And it took a half-second longer than it should have for the recognition to crystallize, to catch the feeling of someone pressed against his chest. Izuku froze, every muscle in his body under tension like a spring about to snap as he looked down in quiet horror at Ochako's gently slumbering form, soft sliver of moonlight painting a thin silver line across her cheek. She looked relaxed. She'd fallen asleep with a smile on her face, and her fingers were threaded through his own, her palm pressed to the back of his hand like she was holding it from behind. All the pads on her fingertips save her thumb were touching his skin softly. Her knees were tucked up halfway to her chest, and Izuku realized slowly that he'd curled around her like she was slotting into him, every inch of his form pressed against every inch of hers. The room was completely silent, and he could hear the faint thudding of her heartbeat, and he hadn't stopped looking at her. It felt like he couldn't stop, even if he'd wanted to. A strand of hair had fallen over her cheek, and he was struck with the absurd urge to tuck it behind her ear for her. He had to catch himself from doing it, his hand halfway there before he even noticed. He needed to get away. Her back was pressed up against him, and he could feel the subtle, regular pressure of her chest rising and falling as she breathed, and the intimacy was killing him. It felt like too much to deal with, so soon after he'd discovered how he felt. He'd been so stupid this whole time, the whole 2 years they'd known each other, because every time he ran it through his head and tried to pinpoint when he first started liking her, the date got pushed back further and further, and he was only realizing now how much time he'd wasted. It had been 2 years of his hopeless pining disguising itself as awkwardness and his barefaced adoration masquerading as friendly admiration. He thought of every late-night conversation, and every time they'd saved each other, and every time she'd done something small and insignificant that still completely enthralled him and took his breath away, and he still hadn't figured it out until tonight, when it was already too late. A year away from graduating. Even if she was interested in him like that, unlikely at best, getting into a relationship now would just be cruel for the both of them. They both had too many people counting on them becoming pro-heroes for them to get distracted and falter. He respected her and her goals too much to even consider it, or, at least to consider it realistically. It was hard not to fantasize about dating her just a little bit when she was curled up against him like this, like they'd gone to bed together, and it occurred to him for a moment that it would be really nice to fall asleep like this every night. He flushed red. I'm not going to be able to look her in the eyes for like a month after this. Izuku shook his head and tried to focus. There would be plenty of time to analyze his thoughts and suitably repress them later. Promoted stories. You'll also like The Hero Who Sings with a Smile 38.3K 363 Hi. Guys, this is my first story I write on Wattpad. I hope you like it. Finished. 8.3K 508 tilde. He save all of them, just a smile plastered on his face before disappearing through the wind. The Hero's Return MHAXJJK, ongoing 113K 1.7K and quad. Izuku. Midoriya. After being betrayed and killed, vanishes leaving hurt people behind. After 2 months and a half, he come back. Changed. How will the class read? Izuku's Harem Academia 184K 1.7 Qst. Read. Free. Onishots 149K 3K. This is a collections of free X readers. Requests on this are now closed. Not all heroes wear capes. Some just have 8.42.5K 1.4 kilo. Everybody. This is a suicidal, depressed Deku book with Dadmik. Will their bond grow? Will Mike fuck up? Will Izuku try to kill himself? Find out yourself. Number 1 Radio. Mirko X Shy Male Reader 166K 1.1 Key. Don't own MHA. I hope you enjoy the story I made. Right now, he needed to make getting away his top priority. He could address the fact that he had a crush in the morning, as daunting a task as that seemed, but right now he had to deal with the consequences of him apparently being some kind of sleep pervert who'd managed to roll off the couch and start snuggling with his unconscious friend. He planted his free hand on her back to hold her in place as he gradually started to inch backwards, trying to pull his arm away. He could feel the smooth, rounded bumps of her spine under his palm and the gentle thump of her heartbeat, and he almost reconsidered his escape plan because he swore any more physical contact with her would be the death of him. Too late now, he had to commit. He got his arm halfway out before she stirred. The comforting rhythm of her breathing stuttered, and the muscles in her back tensed. She made a low, sleepy noise at the base of her throat that he could feel reverberating against his hand, and Izuku went stock still, hoping that she would go back to sleep. He wasn't so lucky. Deku. Her voice was quiet and heavy with sleep, but in the dark, with her nestled up against him, it felt like a cannon shot. Why, yeah. Neither of them said anything for what felt like minutes. Izuku thought about speaking up, but that felt wrong, almost profane. The moment was suspended like a soap bubble, perfect and fragile and iridescent as long as it hung in the air, and he couldn't bear to touch it. He realized dimly that she hadn't let go of his hand. Ochako twisted in place, turning so that she was facing towards him, eyes downcast as she bit her lip. She was still pressed up against the length of his body, and he shifted so his arms were looped around the small of her back, and he had no idea what he was doing. Why wasn't he pulling away? For that matter, why wasn't she? Hi, she whispered. Hey. Izuku whispered back, eyes flicking across her face like he was looking for a clue, trying to think of something to say. A hesitant smile played across her lips. I'm sorry for pulling you onto the mattress. I didn't mean for this. She gave a short, sharp gesture down at their arrangement to happen. Guess I fell asleep. Oh, my god, Izuku sighed in relief. I thought I'd sleepwalked over and laid down like a creep or something. No, this is totally my fault. Well, actually, I guess you did kinda start the cuddling. And you also kissed me, but I'm pretty sure you were asleep for that. I did what? Oh, no, not like that, she said, eyes suddenly wide, and squeezed his hand tight. Like, like on the cheek. The clarification did little to assuage his guilt. Izuku winced and screwed his eyes shut, and he could feel his face heating up. I'm so sorry, Ochako. I don't know what my problem is, I really didn't. I liked it, she interrupted quietly. The words stopped his apology dead. You did? He asked hollowly. She gave a fractional nod downward, her face steady. You are so special to me, you're my best friend, and you're gonna be a great hero, and you're already the best person I think I've ever met, and I think I need to do something. Izuku stayed perfectly still as she reached out, closing the distance between them to cup his cheek gently. Her hand was cool to the touch, and she'd extended her pinky so that she wouldn't make him float, and that small gesture pinned him in place. It was so her, one of the million tiny things that composed Ochako Raraka, that set her apart and made her exceptional, and he was transfixed by every single one of them. I think, Ochako said again, voice low and quiet in a way that brought goosebumps to his arms, that I need to kiss you. Oh, on the mouth, preferably. Because, because I haven't been able to think about anything else for a while now, and I'm thinking that maybe if I do it, all, I'll be able to get over it and then I can move on and give becoming a hero the focus it deserves. The words set off a swooping, wild feeling of happiness that rolled through the pit of his stomach for a split second before the rational part of his mind. The part of his mind that wasn't hungry to kiss her that instant, picked up on the second half of her sentence and brought him back to reality. She's right, he thought, and swallowed heavily around the lump in his throat, trying to meet her gaze. He thought about how she was going to provide for her parents. He thought of his mom, and All Might, and the world that needed a symbol of peace more and more with every day that passed, and he nodded, a tight, quick little motion. I think that might be a good idea, He didn't know if it was hesitance or sadness that threatened to make his voice waver, but he stopped mid-sentence and breathed out slowly, raising his hand to where she was cupping his cheek and folding his fingers over her knuckles gently. I've been having the same problem, he finished, and she inhaled sharply, though her face didn't change, lips pursed and eyes steady. Okay, she said quietly, and her hand slowly slid back until it was tangled in the hair at the back of his neck, and they locked eyes for just a beat, hearts thrumming identical tempos against their ribcages. There was something prickling along the inside of his skin and making his breathing shallow, and Izuku realized with a start that it was almost like desperation, because he'd wasted so much fucking time. So he leaned forward, the same moment she did. He'd meant for it to be a professional kiss, if there was such a thing. They both needed it like breathing, and they both knew that it couldn't possibly go anywhere, so it'd be best to make it quick. After it was over, he'd trudge back to his room to sleep for the night, and in the morning, they'd enter into a silent contract to never mention it again. At least, that was the plan. Instead, he kissed her, and his mind went blank. 10 seconds passed, then 20. Neither one of them was willing to pull away. He felt delirious, hyper-aware of every sensation and drunk on each one of them, relishing the way her body twined against his. Her lips were dry and soft, and he could feel the warmth from her cheeks against his face. She gasped quietly when he dragged his teeth against her bottom lip, and the noise sent a shiver through his body, making his fingertips dig into the soft skin at the small of her back where her shirt had ridden up. She reciprocated by hooking a leg around his waist, using it and the hand still knotted in his hair to drag him against her even harder. They stayed like that for what felt like minutes, and would have stayed far longer, but Izuku was struck with a sudden, desperate urge to see her face, and managed to summon up the willpower to pull away. A difficult act, made even harder by the petulant little whine she made against his mouth when she felt him going. Ochako's eyes were closed. He watched, captivated, as they flickered open, deep chocolate brown shrouded in a slightly glassy, faraway look. He could tell that she was trying to keep from breathing too hard. He felt her chest moving against him as she took short, shallow little inhalations to force air through slightly parted lips. He met her gaze and imagined he could see his own face reflected in hers, her cheeks flushed, eyes wide and wild and a little desperate. In that instant, he understood everything perfectly. 2 years worth of things he hadn't even felt consciously rose to the surface and were thrown suddenly into the light, and he knew it all, the sum total of what she meant to him. It rolled over him like a wave, and he knew he had to tell her. He was able to squeeze out a half second's worth of thought. I don't think I'm ever going to get over her. And then she was kissing him again, and he couldn't think about anything else. When Ochako finally pulled away from him, she thought she was going to burst. There was a pleasant warmth pulsing in the pit of her stomach, and her whole body felt sensitive and tingly like she'd stepped out of a hot shower into cool air. She swore she could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips as they traced lazy whorls on Izuku's back. She was wrung out. She'd spent so long with emotions she couldn't bear to address, and the effort of having them suddenly brought to the surface and dealt with in the most visceral way possible had left her feeling like a squeezed sponge. She didn't even have it in her to panic about the fact that she was still laying with Izuku on the mattress, both of them on their sides, smiling weakly at each other in the aftermath of the most spontaneous thing either of them had ever done. I have a lot of respect for your tactical abilities, Ochako, he started, breaking the silence, and she had to bite down on her lip to keep from laughing at the dazed look in his eyes. But in hindsight, we should just kiss and get it over with, was a really shitty plan. She thumped him in the chest, still smiling widely. You went along with it. I'm dumb. We already established that. She narrowed her eyebrows at him in mock anger, and he couldn't stifle a laugh. Okay, okay, your plan wasn't shitty. It may have been a little, misguided. How's that? 'Cause when I told you I was having the same problem as you, I probably should have specified how bad it was. Izuku grinned self-consciously. His hand was tracing lightly up and down her side, which was making it weirdly hard to think, and she was close enough to feel the little half-chuckle he gave reverberate against her sternum. It's really, really bad. I've been trying to not kiss you basically all day. She stiffened in his arms, and felt her cheeks heat up, which was ludicrous. She hadn't kept very good track of time, but she was pretty sure they'd just been making out for somewhere between 10 minutes and 2 hours, and she felt like she should have been able to get her head around the idea that he might have wanted to kiss her. And yet, it still got her heart beating faster. Oh God, me too, she exclaimed, absurdly relieved. And I'll have you know, you really haven't made it easy on me. I haven't made it easy on you. You're wearing my clothes right now. Izuku protested. Do you have any idea how cute you look? They're just comfy. She fired back. And you did start spooning me, which, I thought you said that was your fault. Okay, maybe that one was a tie. But you picked me up in the kitchen earlier, and I really, really wanted to kiss you then. But then you dropped me, which was super confusing, but that's not even the hard part. The hard part is that you're just really incredible, and wait, hold on, you're way cooler than me. And you're such a good person, and you're going to be a fantastic hero someday, and I really admire how dedicated you are too. You don't get to talk to me about dedication, mister. I don't know how many bones have broken. You're so determined about everything you do, and. But all I'm trying to say is that you're so special, and it's like. And also, you're really hot, she interjected, mostly just to shut him up. She noted with a hint of pleasure that it was tremendously effective. His face went an attractive shade of crimson, and he stopped mid-sentence, closing his mouth and swallowing an embarrassed smile. God, he's cute. So, she continued, taking advantage of the momentary lapse in their amiable bickering, I have a problem. Because you mean a lot to me, and you really are my best friend, and I don't know what to do now. I just had the one plan, and it turns out it was pretty shitty after all, cause now I just want to kiss you even more. And I can't, and so, and so. She faltered. He was looking at her with a kind of tenderness that made her feel weirdly warm, and she remembered abruptly how nice it had been to fall asleep with him, how easy it had been to relax in his arms. And so now we need a new plan. Izuku finished for her, and she let out a sigh of relief. She'd lost her train of thought, not to mention the fact that there was something intensely comforting about the word we. She gave a short, determined nod in response. I think I have one, he said quietly. He shifted, starting to roll over onto his back, and she let out a gasp. His hands were on her hips, and he pulled her with him as he twisted, so she ended up laying half on top of his chest, their faces inches apart. Izuku's eyes flickered down to her lips, and Ochako let out a shaky breath. We can't. Why not? We shouldn't. Why not? Because we're going to be heroes. She cried, and pushed herself away. Her hands splayed over his chest as she rose up so she was kneeling, one knee on either side of his waist, putting some distance between them. He sat up like he was going to follow her, then hesitated, sagging back so he was propped up on his elbows. Because you're going to be one of the world's top heroes, and that means you've got enough on your plate already, without any distractions. You don't. She felt tears trickling behind her eyes, and turned her head away, pressing her lips into a thin line to keep her face steady. You don't need me in your life. Yes, I do, he said fiercely, and the intensity in his gaze did nothing to hide the way his voice caught. Ochako flushed at the words. I've been thinking about what you said, about how you're willing to be lonely for the rest of your life if that's what it takes to be a hero, 'cause maybe it is, right? Maybe that's the price. Maybe heroes spend so much time being strong, and fearless, and taking on the suffering of others that they don't have anything left in them. That's, that's what I always thought, at least. When I started training to attend UA, that's what I was prepared to do. His expression softened. He looked at her almost wistfully, and it stirred something in her chest. What changed? She asked quietly. Craziest thing, he said. Day of the entrance exam, I fell, and I didn't hit the ground. Someone had caught me for no reason. She'd just seen that I needed help. Later that same day, she caught me again. A sad smile suddenly broke across his face. Do you ever think about the fact that we only got into UA because of the rescue points we got from saving each other? Yes, she said, without hesitation. All the time. Yeah, well, he coughed out a laugh. Me too. And it made me realize something. He sat up fully, his palms planted flat on the mattress behind him. He was close again. She could have leaned down and rested her forehead against his, and she nearly did. His eyes were shining faintly, and she wanted desperately to hold him. A vision of his future hit her again like a splash of cold water. Deku, stumbling into his home at sunrise, covered in bruises and shallow cuts from whatever fight he'd gotten into that night, and collapsing into bed with no one there to take care of him. The image made her hands ball into fists, fingers clutching at the soft material of his shirt, and she felt a sensation of powerlessness rise in her gut as he continued. You said it'd be bad luck if I fell on the day of the exam. And, you were wrong. It might have been the luckiest thing I ever did, because as stupid and small as it sounds, you showed me something when you caught me, both of those times. 'Cause I realized that being a hero isn't about defeating villains, or rescuing people, or putting the world on your shoulders. It's not about saving everybody. It's. He sighed, squeezing his eyes shut and frowning like he couldn't think of the right words. She could feel him trembling faintly underneath her, but she couldn't see what was behind his eyes when he opened them. It was all shadow there, hooded over by his brow, the sharp lines and edges of his face cast starkly in faint moonlight. He lifted an arm and the motion looked weighty. Along looked weighty, like he was dragging something heavy along as he raised his hand to her face. It was his ruined hand. The scar tissue on his palm was smooth on her cheek, the feeling offset by the rough calluses at the base of each of his fingers. It's not about saving everybody, he said again, quieter this time. It's about saving one person at a time. One person who needs it. You showed me that. You've inspired me to do that since the day I met you. And that's exactly why I need you in my life. Because you're my hero. The hand dropped. I understand if you don't feel the same way. I'm probably not a very easy person to like. And it's selfish of me to say stuff like that when you have people counting on you too. But, I needed to say it. I'm sorry. Izuku laid back down, the motion choppy and irregular as he stuttered stepped his weight from his palms, to his elbows, to his back, folding into himself with a look of resignation on his face. Ochako felt frozen in place. She realized with a start that her lungs were burning, and she slowly let out the breath she hadn't even realized she'd been holding. There was a delay, a few seconds of silence while her mind processed the words, and then she took a shuddering inhale, screwed her eyes shut to keep from crying, and promptly hit him in the chest. Izuku made a wheezing, gasping noise like a set of bagpipes being run over by an 18-wheeler, and Ochako pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes to stem back tears. You're going to make me cry twice, in the same night, Izuku Midoriya, I can't believe you. I get that you're mad at me, he coughed out, voice strained. And, I am mad at you, she said, which was a lie. She felt really warm, and his words kept running through her head on repeat, bringing a watery smile to her face that she couldn't wipe off, no matter how stern she wanted to look. What makes you think you can just say something like that without any warning? You're gonna kill me. Izuku looked vaguely worried, and he was impossibly beautiful. His nose was scrunched in concern, emerald green eyes sparkling wetly in the dim half-light, his freckles splattered just beneath them. She'd never stood a chance. Oh my God, she sighed, blinking away tears as she fanned her face with her hand. You're my hero too. You make me want to be a better person every single day, and you inspire me to try my hardest no matter what. And you're really cute, and really perfect, and my best friend. And I can't believe you'd say something like that, because at this rate, I'm gonna cry on every single shirt you own. Ochako sniffled and stared down at him in mute adoration, until she realized abruptly that she was straddling him. Had been the whole time, actually, which was kinda embarrassing, and she let herself fall forwards to lay against him instead, her cheeks red. He wrapped his arms around her hesitatingly, like he wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. So, he started. Are you really mad? Because between this and hitting me, I'm really not sure where we stand exactly, and, oh. She'd pressed a kiss to the underside of his jaw. Revenge for before. And he'd stopped talking mid-sentence, his head snapping in the other direction like he'd combust if he looked at her. No, I'm not, she sighed, then gave a short little laugh. Sorry. That was just a lot to process. You really don't mess around once you've decided to do something, huh? Izuku made a low noise of affirmation as he turned back to look at her, his hand running lazily up and down her back. I meant every word. Good, she said, and she felt suddenly lighter. 'Cause I need you in my life too. She ducked her head to hide her smile, burying it in the crook of his neck. That felt really good to say. Ochako heard him exhale in relief, and she could feel his heartbeat speeding up where his chest was pressed against hers. She lifted her head to peer up at him inquisitively and was a little shocked to see that he was crying softly, lower lip wobbling as he smiled at her. So, we're dating now? He asked, wiping at his eyes with his forearm. We're dating now, she said, rolling the words around in her mouth just to see how they felt, and a warm happiness suffused her chest. She was suddenly overcome with just how special he was to her, and she had to bite down on a smile as she looped her arms around his neck. Okay. He nodded, and she could see how he pressed his lips together to keep from breaking into a grin too. Then what do we do now? Well, she said slowly, stretching the word out like taffy. I'm still pretty tired. You wanna go to bed? You mean like? He waved a hand vaguely in the air, eyes wide like she'd just suggested sex. Tea together. We already did it once. Well, yeah, but that was by accident. Then let's do it on purpose. Are you absolutely sure you're okay with it? Deku, she said seriously, if we don't, I will literally just spend the next 3 hours lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and fantasizing about it, and I'm not gonna get any sleep. There was a pregnant pause, and she wondered briefly if that was altogether too much information to share with the boy she'd started dating 30 seconds ago. Yeah, he said finally, sighing. Me too. With that, he reached down, gathering the blanket up in his hands and letting it unfurl as he tossed it over the length of the bed, before pulling it up to cover the both of them. Ochako rolled off his chest onto her side, and happiness thrummed behind her ribs when he took the hint, throwing his arm over her torso and turning to spoon her. Good night, Deku, she whispered. Night, Ochako. His mouth was right by her ear, and it sent pleasant shivers through her body when he said her name. Tension she hadn't even known she'd been holding trickling out of her muscles as she relaxed against him. She couldn't remember another time she'd been this happy. Ochako was in the depths of sleep when the lights came back on all of a sudden. It was like day in his living room. The brightness sent stars bursting behind her eyelids even as she snapped them shut, slamming her hands over her eyes and wincing. Behind her, Izuku groaned and turned away, letting out a gentle noise of disgust at having his rest interrupted. The TV came on too, the jingle for the local news station blaring urgently. The noise made her jump, and Izuku cursed under his breath, fumbling as he tried to stretch his arm out to the end table by the couch and grab the remote. Thanks to the tireless efforts of power plant workers across the city, electricity has just now been restored to approximately 80% of households. However, a resurgence in the snowfall that took place earlier today and subsequent difficulty in mobilizing road clearing vehicles will likely make transportation impossible for at least another 2 days, leaving city residents snowed in for at least a little while longer. We'll keep you updated as the situation develops. We go now to our reporter, Live on the SCE. The TV clicked off. Izuku was sitting up, hunched over with the blanket covering just his legs, and he tossed the remote over his shoulder onto the couch. He grunted in dissatisfaction, rolling out of bed and tottering over to turn the lights off, his limbs heavy with sleep. He batted aimlessly at the switch with his eyes half closed a few times, until he scored a hit that plunged the room into darkness. Sounds like we're gonna be stuck together for a couple days, she teased in the direction of his footsteps, shifting to make room when he got back. Hope you aren't gonna get tired of me. He yawned and settled back onto the bed, sitting over her and chuckling lightly as he ran a hand through her hair. Nah, you're a pretty good person to share a home with. Or, that's and not what I meant. Not that you aren't. I've had a lot of fun the past day, even without all the, new stuff. I just think it would be really cool to be, like, our roommates or something. Roommates, she said flatly. I'm tired, he said defensively. No, no, roommates. That's exactly the kind of relationship I thought I was getting into. Now who's being ironic? Izuku grumbled, and she snorted with laughter. She reached up from where she was lying to grab his hand, humming plaintively and tugging him down to the bed. He pulled the blanket with him, and Ochako snuggled against his chest, murmuring a little sigh of pleasure and settling against his form like she'd been doing it her entire life. He was really warm, and his arms were wrapped around her, and something told her it wouldn't take long for her to fall asleep again. Izuku let out a little grunt of satisfaction at the intimacy and rested his chin on top of her head. She took the opportunity to plant kisses along his neck, and she giggled at the way the bass in his voice made her lips tickle when he spoke. You got any ideas how we can pass the time for the next few days? A couple, she said slyly, pushing away from his chest a bit so she could look at him, her fingers tracing along the line of his jaw and tilting his head down towards her. Please, he begged, anything but cards. She laughed, and when she leaned up to kiss him, he met her halfway. They twined against each other in the darkness, close enough that it was hard to tell where one of them stopped and the other began, and maybe that was okay. It felt right to be pressed up against him, their bodies fitting together like puzzle pieces, and something warm filled the hollows of her chest. It might have been happiness, or contentment, or belonging, but it was older, and softer, and stronger than any of those. She knew what it was, and a blush rose to her cheeks, because wasn't it too soon? Honestly, who fell in love that quickly? He did. She did. But there would be time enough for them to say it another day. And outside, the snow continued to fall. End. Where stories live. Discover now.